go.
I mean, 2 years into that pandemic, and we really needed these remote tools, and there was not many people giving talks on them, so now we have them.
Yeah, hello everyone.
Hello everyone.
Fantastic. So yes, I mean, I guess are you two ready to get going?
Yeah.
Whose screen do I bring on first? I see I've got both screens here. Is it perfect?
That's it. Thank you.
That's good. Okay, well then we will let you get started, and I'll take myself and Rachel off. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Lorraine Steyn. I'm the CEO of KRS. We're a software development company based in Cape Town, South Africa. And we are a fully remote company, and I have the privilege of working with a lot of my remote teams, and we actually use all the tools we're going to talk to you about.
Yeah, and I'm Alain, also director of KRS. My responsibility falls more in the area of training, and therefore using these tools on how to do remote training sessions, but also am part of a dev team, which is, as Law said, fully remote.
Yeah, I think the same thing happened to us that probably happened to a lot of companies. 2 years ago hit, and we went from an office and lots of socials and Friday drinks and lunches and football tables to suddenly just seeing everybody behind little blocks on a Zoom screen. And we made the decision to go fully remote and stay that way. So this is now our life, and we need to get the best tools and set new expectations, new ways of working. Yeah, there was a whole lot of stuff that came with it. So we're going to tell you what we learned.
Yeah, so the agenda for this talk is we're going to start off with a demo because everyone loves demos. It's a lot easier to see where things go on. Then we'll talk a little bit about why we've chosen some of the tools that we've got and perhaps some problems with it. And we'll end off with a rant because it always feels like a good thing to end on.
Alrighty, so we're going to swap screens in a minute, and Alain's going to be the driver. He's going to have a split personality. He's going to be both the host and the guest. I'm going to be the narrator, just because we figure if one person can do the talking and one can do the typing, it'll go a little bit easier. Whenever you see a black themed IDE, you're looking at the host window. Whenever you see a white themed IDE, you'll be looking at a guest in whichever tool we're showing you. Interestingly, all the tools work cross-platform, so our host is on Windows, our guest is on Mac. Not that it matters, just to show you that we have cross-platform as well. So I think that's basically it. I think we are ready to swap over to Alain, please.
Cool.
All right, so let's kick off here. Because it's .NET Days, we thought we'd start with Visual Studio. Precisely Visual Studio Code. And Visual Studio Code has a tool called Live Share. So I'm sure a lot of you know it. We did say this is a beginner talk. But let's go through the basics because Live Share's got a lot better in the last 2 years. What we're going to do, Alain, I'm not going to be able to read my notes. We'll have to make sure we can do this. Alain's going to click the Live Share. I think he's already done it. It's really simple to create a sharing session. Basically, the one side's going to click Share and the other side's going to click Join. So Alain's going to kick off the share. And while he does that, I'm going to talk to you about, just get this up. I'm going to talk to you about some of the things on the left-hand side there. It's not just your IDE that you can share. You can also share a terminal session. You can share servers, which basically means you can share URLs and ports. So that's really nice. I mean, you can share your port 8080 or whatever it is that you've got your web front ends running on. So it's not just doing the debugging and doing the code editing. We can also run. Alain, if you have, okay, so links copy to the keyboard. If you've got guests coming in, we should see what that looks like in a moment. We're not going to flip screens. We'll just stay here and talk you through it. What I'm expecting, there we go. Law requested to join the collaboration session, accept read-write. All right, so we've got a read-write session going. That means I've got full control. I can do anything I want on Alain's environment. Just to tell you what we're looking at some C# code in Visual Studio Code. It's from an open source cutter called the Gilded Rose. Well, not that the code matters. In fact, please ignore the code. It's really baby, really simple, just to do the demo. So, Alain, how about let's go and share a terminal, because that's kind of interesting. The one we have right now is read-only, because it was there before we started the sharing. So I think we need a new one, which is fully shared, please. And then you can run the tests for me. There you go. Shared terminal. So Alan's going to kick that off. While the tests are running, I'd like to just mention that we're obviously using the voice of this platform. There is a plugin for Visual Studio Code, so you can have audio as part of your session. It's not built in, but there are, as with everything in Visual Studio Code, 3,000 plugins, and one of them is audio. Oops, lots of red. So that's what we were expecting. Failing tests. Right, I told you this was trivial. Alan needs to go and change the word fixed me to foo. All right, you can save that and run tests again. So I think now what we'll go and do is see what is the guest seeing. Are they seeing the same that we're seeing? So Alan's going to do his split personality thingy and swap over to guest. See the white theme? And it's green. So what the person running the test, the guest is seeing the same experience, the test's been corrected, and it's green. You can also see Alan's cursor in yellow over there. You can just see it at the end of foo. That's where he left his cursor. So there are visual hints about where each of the collaborators are. Alan, I think the guest could do a little bit of typing. We've got another test we can just paste in. So really simple. This is another spelling mistake type. But just to see that the guest is fully able to add things to the environment, and the guest is now running the tests. All right, so good collaboration, and it's red. What we want you to imagine is that the two parties are now going to go off and try and figure out the problem themselves. So I think what we'd like is for the guest to open some other unit. Yeah, that will do nicely, the CS. So the guest has gone off and is sitting on, where will we be? Line 11. All right, cool. The guest is on line 11, something that says this.items equals items. Be nice to see, where is Alan? Would you like to head back to host? Okay, the host is not in the same place. So you have independent ability to go and scroll through code, even though you're in a collaboration session. Alan, have you found the problem? I think you have. Eh? Well, let's imagine that what you want to do is bring your guest, you want to bring Law back to the problem and where you found it. So could you do the focus participants? It's a really nice option. One little button. We're going to do it on that side. We can do it in either. So we'll go with focus participants. No, am I focused?
Yes, you are.
I didn't see the pop-up message though.
The pop-up appears on the other side.
All right. What Alan can do is he can bring everyone in the session into the place where he's working. And when I say everyone, we're talking pairing, but please have the loosest definition possible of pairing. We don't necessarily mean only one person. It can be an ensemble, it can be mobbing, whatever your term is. It can be one, or in Visual Studio, up to 30 guests in one session. All right. So we've focused everybody. Alan's changed the spelling mistake and is rerunning tests. It's as simple as that. There's not a lot more I really want to tell you on this. You can edit, you can share stuff, you can do debugging, you can do all the things you would expect. I think what I'd like us to look at now is just how you do commits. How do we save our work? Thank you, Alan. So this is really nice. Visual Studio automatically puts a co-author onto your commit. And I really like that. I find when I've done many hours or days of pairing and only one side's been doing the commits, I start to feel like my contribution is not very visible. So Visual Studio is using the the co-author feature that's available to us in our Bitbucket vault. So that's nice. And we can commit there. Alan, what have I forgotten?
You haven't forgotten anything, Laura. I just want to point out one other feature. One of the other features that this has is the ability to add a comment. And if you're working as a group or doing some training, and you notice something, you can go and add a comment to a line of code. And I will just quickly scroll down and create a comment thread. And we've now got the comment thread. It means you can make a note for something to come back. Maybe we want to refactor something here. And it's just a nice way of, as you discover things, you can put notes in which people can see what's going on.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. It's probably also the other thing I did forget was to mention that although we're doing this in Visual Studio Code, this is pretty much all available in Visual Studio as well. It actually comes bundled with Visual Studio. With code, you've got to add, I think, as a plugin. But
no, the plugin is for audio. It comes bundled with both. And you can do one side is using Visual Studio Code, and the other side is using full-on Visual Studio. So yes, there are some nice features with that.
I think ours has been up for a while. Alrighty, I think we're done with Visual Studio. I think you can shut down all these environments to make sure we don't use resources. And we'd really like to go on to a tool from our hosts, JetBrains. We're going to show you Code With Me. And I know we sound like we're just being nice to them, but no, really we love this tool. It's a great pairing tool. It's available for a lot of their IDEs. We're going to use WebStorm. And JetBrains, if you're listening, you could be adding it to Rider for us. We'd be really, really over the moon. But in the meantime, we'll show it to you in WebStorm and Code With Me. So we're back on host, right? Black background, start a session, Alan. Sure, kick it off. All right. There are a lot of permissions in Code With Me. You've got quite fine-grained control. That's really good. You can have a read-only session. You can allow editing files. You can allow access to the terminal or not, run and debug access or not, other tools or not, and everything's got custom permissions as well. So that's really all very cool. And it's got the call facility built in. So if you want to do everything in one environment, it's all there for you. Yeah, kick off a session for us. Thanks, Alain. So on the other side, Alan's going to be doing the usual thing. It's copied automatically to clipboard. There's a link. You do the join on your guest side. And here we go. Law wants to join the TypeScript session, security code, and we can accept. So there's also this additional code level of security here, which I think is pretty great. Just to tell you what we're doing, we're actually doing the same kata, but the TypeScript version of it this time in WebStorm. So I think, Alan, on this time round, we really want to run our tests, but there's such a nice integrated test runner. Do you want to do it that way rather than creating a terminal? Yes. So we can just kick off the tests with the integrated test runner, which is a very pretty little tool, and it shows you a test so nice and graphically. While it's running, I'll just mention that we could have created a terminal just like we did in VS Code. We would have had the same thing where we had to make a new shared one because the current one would have been pre the sharing, and everything else would have been exactly the same. And yeah, look how neatly it's put it all out for us. Expected fix me and foo. All right, so you're going to do foo and run it again. Right, are you pretty much ready to swap over to guest? We'll go and see what the guest's seeing. Oh, where's the guest gone? Oh, we're on Visual Studio. Too many guests. This is why it gets very confusing. Yeah, a couple of things here. What do we want to do next? Tests are passing. Yeah, the bottom test passed, 1 of 1 test, 13 milliseconds, all good. We're going to write some code again, right? Same as last time. Same procedure as last time, Miss Sophie, if anyone knows what that movie was. Again, we've got our aged brie should increase in quality tests, and I do apologize for the cheesy nature of these tests. You can shoot me later. Okay, can we get the test to run from this side? Instantiating tests. There we go. Okay, so we're going to do the same little job of saying, oh, we better go and figure out what's wrong. So we're going to, yeah, we can see it's going to be red. We're going to go and open something. Alan, you can find that TypeScript file for us, Gilded Rose. Okay, and let's go to export class or list of items. Sure, why not? So we're on that line 17. And are we following? Are we doing anything special at the moment? We're not following, are we?
No.
All right.
We can see the host is sitting there. There's a little A at the top just to say that they're there.
So I think we'd quite like to go and have a look at the host side now. Okay, and the host is in a completely different place. Again, same ability to work. Obviously, all the nice stuff, all the tool tips and the hints and all the great stuff that's built into these tools is all there for you. Something I'd like us to do now, Alan, is actually force Law to follow you. So the first thing is make everyone follow you, bring them in again, everyone, not just one necessarily. And now I'd like us to try and identify the two cursors. You may need to swap back and put a cursor on the other one so that we can exactly see. I'd like to see both cursors on this piece of code. Okay, so laws at the end of foo, there you go. You see the little yellow, orangey, reddy cursor, gee, my color definition's poor today. And Alan's is the white flashing one a line above. Now we're going to show you one extra thing. So at the moment, I'm following Alan's session, but we can both still type, all right? Now I want you to go into pair coding mode, which is a fancier thing available in Code With Me. And what it's actually done is it's put both cursors together. You can see them flashing sort of that red and white. And this feels to me really like more like the physical pairing when you actually swapped keyboards. So you really make sure everyone's engaged and at the same place and working together on the session. So that's pretty cool. All right, so we just showed you how we can really bring everyone together. You want to fix it quickly, Alan? You've already fixed it, thank you. And then run tests. All right, and again, you get the nice little tree of the tests and what's passed. Trying to think if there's anything else I really wanted to say on this one. I think the next one is just to look at the commits then. We'll end off the same way as we did for Visual Studio Code. Now it's a little bit different. The changes up top, one file, is the stuff that Alan's changed, and then it actually says changes by law. So it splits the commit by each contributor, which is also really nice. Does mean you need to do 2 commits to get all the work in, but that's pretty much okay. If Alan clicks now on changes by law, it puts an automatic comment in, changes by law. So this one isn't going to use the co-author. It's just going to use a comment. And you can have a team agreement or some way of working that you maybe want to put some more than that as well as changes by law. But you can give credit, and it's really easy to do so. It's sort of built in encouraging you to give credit for each person's work. Certainly it splits the commits, so you can always see who's done what. All right, Alan, anything else on this one?
The only thing you haven't mentioned is the fact that the client is actually a lightweight version. It's not the full app. When you join a Code With Me session, it downloads the client and runs it in there, and all the features of the host become available to the clients, which is a little bit different to how the others work, where you need the IDE set up on your side. This I could connect to someone, and if they needed some help with a WebStorm project or something like that, that's why we're encouraging JetBrains to add it to all their IDEs. It's a great feature inside there.
Yes, I think that that idea that you don't have to have an entire environment all available. Use the lightweight client, and you can join for reviews, for training. It's actually a very, very powerful feature. Thanks for that one. All right, are we ready to go on to the next one? So you can shut this down. We have one more demo for you. And this time it's a very small, simple little tool, not built into any IDE. This is just a screen sharing tool, but it's particularly good and it's not as laggy as some screen sharing tools. So we thought it was worthy of a place in our top 3. So what you're going to look at next is a tool called Pop. You find it at pop.com. It's as simple as that. Start a new meeting or join a meeting. Very much a similar kind of approach. When you start a new meeting, you can turn on camera and microphone and do all those kind of things. Alain's going to start the meeting now. It's the same thing of copy invite link. You send that off to the person who you want to have come in, or people, multiple people. Right, when they're connected, then Alain chooses to share his screen. And now what he's doing, he can define the area or the full screen. So we'll just pick full screen and share it. So this is particularly useful when you haven't got a sharing tool built into the tool you need to use. We use it extensively for doing collaboration sessions on SQL Server, Data Group, all the tools that don't have any kind of built-in pair coding mode. All right, so Alain could be typing. There's full control of the cursor from the guest side as well. What we really want to show you on this one is it's got one really unique feature which we're over the moon about. Alain, could you just point out something? Yeah, there you go, with a pen. So it's got this little built-in pen. And I don't know how often in a pairing session you're busy trying to explain, no, it's 2 lines up. No, more left. You know, with this one, you just go there and you mark it. And you see how cute it is. It just fades within a few seconds. So Alain can turn it into permanent. And we could even both be doing a little diagram now. We could start sketching what we think. No, but it should go there, and then we could do that. And that would be so depending on your tolerance, of course, for using a mouse to scribble anything. But now whatever we've done is staying, and Alain will choose when to turn it into fade, and there it goes again. Okay, so that's really quite addictive. Anybody listening here, we'd really love a pen in all the tools. So we can point to things, but just like I used to put my fat finger on a screen when we were doing physical pairing. A couple more things to mention on this one. So obviously, the fact that it's sharing the whole screen, it will be easy for you to share something you need to run to look at, any of those kind of things. It's useful to mention that the tool's developed by the same guys who did the screen sharing in Slack. So it's got pretty good credentials. It is still in beta. It can be a bit glitchy. There are times when you have to restart sessions, but it's free. So we're prepared to give it a lot of credit, a lot of space for that. It's also cross-platform. It even works on mobile. Okay, so there's tons of nice things in this little tool. Just the simplest little thing ever. And what else did I want to tell you? I think I already mentioned it's at pop.com. Right, anything else, Alain?
Just want to highlight this. Some of our teams, unfortunately, are still supporting desktop apps, and all of the shared server features in any of the sharing tools we've spoken about before don't work. So this, we find those teams are relying on heavily because they can actually run the app, step through, debug together as a pairing in their pairing session, and really, really works well. Nice low latency. It feels almost like you're working on the other machine.
Right, so JetBrains, guys, could you swap us back to our slideshow then? That was the 3 tools we'd wanted to show everybody.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, we have seen a message like this before. We now want to just quickly chat about some of the challenges you face with pair programming. And the challenges from management is always a big one. It's, why do you need 2 people? And we're going to talk a little bit about why we say 2 heads are better than 1. Why do we want people to look at this? Why do we work like that? And here's another problem area we just want to highlight. Have you ever had that developer who says, I don't need to pair, I don't work well, they slow me down. That's not great. That's not the sort of attitude we like inside our teams. So we don't like our rockstar devs. We want them to work with the other people in the team. We were all there one day. We all needed to learn. And if you've got knowledge, you should be able to share it.
So, talking about the other side of that particular dysfunction, because we wanted to just put some of the problems up at this stage. So problems being, bad bosses, people with egos. And there's also people who are really nervous about sharing. Imposter syndrome, I think it's something a lot of people suffer from, where you just don't know if you're good enough. And of course, you'll never really know unless you pair with people, unless you code with people. It's the quickest way to see, hey, I contributed. Gee, I wasn't as stupid as I thought. Oh, they also didn't know that. Or it's really great confidence builder. But you cannot just tell people you will now pair, because the anxiety that can induce is not reasonable, all right? So you have to do a lot of work before that. You have to create the safe spaces. You've got to already have the ability in your teams to converse and talk and support people and take baby steps, and just maybe start with more ensemble sessions where people feel they can hide a little, then start splitting them off into twos. A couple of ways to tackle that one. But we think it's a really great way actually to overcome imposter syndrome, so long as you do it with care and sympathy and empathy, I suppose, a better word.
Yeah, and for us, we found, as we state in here, pairing addresses so many problems. There'll often be conversations with the Scrum Master saying, oh, we need help in this area. The guys are really struggling on this task. And the question which gets asked is, are you pairing? Is the team pairing? Are they working together? Two heads are always better than one. You come up with better solutions. You come up with a better quality system. That's what we're looking for. That's why we push pairing so much. Another benefit of pairing is you've got that person who knows that one part of the domain because they wrote it. They were intimately involved with it and know everything about it. Now they want to go and leave for 2 weeks and the clients want to change. How do you solve that? Pairing up with that person will allow the knowledge to be shared with people and with the rest of the team, and making sure that you don't end up with silos. You have that knowledge shared. It works together. It's a really big benefit in that area. And then the other part is mentoring. We spoke about the rockstar dev, but when you're starting out, you need help. And to sit and work with someone and go through things, even if you're working with another senior and you found this new feature in the latest version of ReSharper, you go, oh, instead of typing that, what about doing it this way? Just those little hints. We're all learning all the time in this field. Let's use the benefit we have of working together and help one another along.
One of the things that I really love about pairing is how it actually helps me to stop I've now lost the word. I sometimes battle just get started, that postponing things. Motivation can be a problem, right? So if I know that someone's waiting for me and we're going to be pairing at, 10 a.m., then I need to get motivated. I need to get moving, get my ass out of bed. And it works for a lot of ways like that. It also just is a way that you're connecting with people. So compared to sitting on your own remotely, where you never see anyone, and that can be very demotivating. Pairing is really a good support for me personally in the way that I work. Just thinking about what else I wanted to say on that one. I think it also just ties back, if you can bear with me a moment, to thinking about how much changed for us. That we used to go into an office and we had people all the time, and suddenly we had no one. I don't know if we all realized just how big a change that actually was for everybody. What I'd like to do is actually just share some personal stories. So, as you've heard, we try and pair in all of our teams all of the time. Well, every day at least on significant chunks of work. Earlier this year, we took on a new client, also remote, fully remote. And this particular time, our devs were going to work on a team with other devs, and they were managing the devs. And they didn't practice pairing. And we mentioned it. We were like, we quite like this, approach. And they were like, oh, yeah, we work together when we need to. But, there was not really the buy-in. So we started seeing more mental health problems, and I mean quite serious ones from the people on that team. And we had serious long chats. And they said, no, it's a lovely client. They're the nicest people ever. Really, everyone loves them. They're trying so hard. And the work? Yeah, the work's great. Interesting tools, interesting domain, interesting challenges. Everyone's really, really happy. But requests for 2 or 3 weeks off for mental health reasons, a number of very personal things happening to people within the team just made us realize that ultimately the isolation is just not good for a lot of people. And there are few who are okay, but for a lot of people that caused so much more stress in their personal lives. So what we've really learned from this experience is that pairing might be something you do for technical reasons, 2 heads are better than one. You might do it for training reasons, that you want to, break silos and train people. But don't underestimate that it's also for emotional support reasons. This is mine too. I have 2 very big ones here. 2 heads are better than one, right? There's a tendency amongst devs the hammer we have is we want to code, and people just climb into it. And when you have a pair partner, at the very least, you have to negotiate something, because else you wouldn't know what each other's about to type. So you have to talk about it. And just that business of talking about what you want to do helps you to think a little more deeply and consider alternatives. The other person can be saying, no, hang on, I would have done that. And you're like, oh yeah, but what about this? And that is a really, really healthy debate that goes on. So that's our kind of funny slide to sum that all up. But there's even stats as well that just says that people who pair generally produce less lines of code, simpler solutions, and the big benefit that we're all hoping for is obviously better quality.
Cool. So we've spoken about and we've demoed an informal way of pairing. Let's just talk about some of the different types of pairing and how we found that they work. When everyone introduces pair programming for the first time, they always talk about driver navigator. This idea comes from the rallying world, where you've got one person who's driving the car and the other person has a list of directions which is busy saying, and you're going to turn here, you're going to turn there. And that's often what happens. There will be one person with a keyboard and mouse busy working and typing, and the rest of the people in the pair or group, this could be a mob, it could be whatever, are fulfilling the navigator role. They're paying attention to what's happening, but they're also thinking those 2 or 3 steps ahead, what's going to come next, where can we go? So that's the model which pairing is always introduced with. If you go and do some research into rally, especially a famous rally driver, Colin McRae, said he hardly ever listened to his navigator. So there's a challenge with this, and we've got some alternatives to talk about, which we have found are better. The next one is ping pong TDD. This is where you're doing test-driven development. What'll happen is, I'm driving, I will type up a test and make it fail. Then Law will take over, make that test passed, and then write the next test, which is failing. And it's a great way of alternating, getting your language put together, designing your system through the tests, alternating the work, making sure you're swapping regularly. If you really want to make it a challenge, you can even make it silent ping pong, where you're not talking about it and you need your code to speak for itself. Earlier on, we spoke about that problem of the rockstar developer. Now, strong mode is a system which comes in pairing where the rockstar fulfills a navigator's role, and they have this concept that they need to follow. For an idea to go from your head into the computer, it must go through someone else's hands. Let me repeat that. For an idea to go from your head to the computer, it must go through someone else's hands. So you need to be able to speak and describe the problem space and the solution that you're coming up in a way that the other person is able to code it. This is not dictating console.writeline. You would say rather, I want something to be put out to the console, and understanding the pairing partner, getting them up to speed, because you learn so much more by doing than just listening or watching. And the final type is tag teaming. This one is what happens more naturally as a pair evolves and people start working together. There's not a specific driver or navigator role. You are both hopping between that role in and out. You are talking, you are discussing, you are talking probably 3 times as much to the amount of code that you're writing, because he's talking about it, coming up with a better solution, going, this is where we want to be. We find that our teams which are doing this and the pairing, and even when Law and I pair together or we're pairing with partners, that's what's happening all the time. And this is where that Code With Me pair programming, pair coding mode is so great, because your cursor's in the same place. You're working together and it's like, I'm going to type this, and then Law goes, I'm going to type this part, and we hop in. So it's driver and navigator, but on steroids, and actually a real world way of working. We said we're going to finish off with a rant, and this is a little bit of a war story as well. So when we went to a remote environment, people started, we had been pairing in our office beforehand, and we were pushing that we want to pair 100% of the time on production code. That's what our goal is inside our teams. So we go into this remote world, and everyone goes with what they're comfortable on. And we have some various icons on the screen there. Just to clarify, we've got Microsoft Teams. We've got Google Meet or Hangouts or whatever they call that nowadays. We've got Zoom. We've got TeamViewer. And we've got Discord. Yes, Discord was used for pairing inside our teams. Why? We geeks, we tend to be gamers as well. So everyone's using Discord. They're working around it. And we noticed these tools, all of them, started generating some anti-patterns with this. The first thing is, have you ever tried to control someone else's screen on one of these tools? Doesn't matter which one, but you get latency, cursor confusion. Try going from a Mac to a Windows machine and you get some funny characters coming out. It tends to come up with this thing of watch the master working. This, your rockstar dev loves, because they go on, they start working, and the rest are watching what's going along. They're not engaged. They're playing on their phones. They're doing other things, dozing off. It is not working. The other thing is these tend to not have the greatest screen quality when sharing, and that's why we have recommended these other tools that we've spoken about, because they all keep, it feels like a native environment which you're working on, and that's the key thing we wanted with this.
Thank you, Alan, for it's very much close to the wrap. We've just noted some credits for all the lovely artwork and the kata that we used, and we are pretty much ready for a Q&A. Thank you, everybody.
Fantastic. That's a brilliant presentation there. Very interesting. Thank you. I do. There's been some great examples of pair programming in the comments as well. So there's a whole load of people doing, pair programming different levels. Some people doing it 100% of the time. Others sort of at least recommending that their team do proper code reviews as well. Sort of if they can't actually pair program, then at least sit down and do a proper pair programming. Code review session together.
So Matt, can we just raise that point, because Law and I feel quite strongly about that. Code review happens after the code is written, which means you need to go back and do rework on your code to fix it up to standards or a missed scenario. That's why we push for pairing so much, because you are doing that earlier in the process. You're reducing your rework.
Oh, that answers my question that I had about how the process fits in with your code reviews and whatnot.
A lot of it's got to do with the seniority of our developers. So when we have two seniors pairing, they might be the same people who would have done the code reviews. Then they can kind of go ahead and, push the thing and approve their own pull request. If it's slightly more junior people, or they don't know the domain as well, then you've got to bring somebody in, of course, to make sure still that, you've done everything right. But at least you've done the most you can to front load it and all your thinking before getting all the way to the end and then finding out you've got a lot of things to change.
Yeah, I was very interested to see that you were finding that you were getting anti-patterns with various tools there as well. The sort of things there. So, I mean, one of the questions we had was whether, how is remote pairing in the sort of the tools that you were showing to start with? How is that different from doing it with an RDP session? or sort of sharing a screen like that. And yeah, these anti-patterns sound like they're a big problem, really.
Yeah, I think it's really a lot of it's the latency. As soon as it becomes laggy, so I don't know, maybe it's slightly different in different parts of the world, but obviously in Africa we have our own challenges, one of which is electricity, although I think the UK is trying to join us in that particular problem. But,
we're working on it.
Yeah, isn't that strange? Yeah? A lot of us battle with our connectivity, so depending on what kind of connectivity have, we see is really, exaggerated compared to people who may be on very fast links. But as soon as it becomes laggy, it just spoils the session entirely. And then if people aren't having fun, if it's not working for them, they stop doing it, because that's human nature, right? And then everything kind of falls to pieces.
Yeah, so that's interesting though. How sort of geographically spread are you when you're doing your remote pair programming? Is it kind of mostly just working from home, away from the office, because of recent events, shall we say, or are you kind of a little bit more around the world?
It's getting that way. It really is. So we have a client in the UK, so there's some devs on that one. We have one developer who has moved to far Eastern Europe. We have people spread all over South Africa because they went like, oh, so I don't need to be near the office anymore. So they left, to different parts of the country, not left the company. So we have a developer in the UK as well, but he's coming home for Christmas. One of the people who was based here. And so people are starting to spread out, and that seems quite normal and seems all right,
It's good. So you were showing a variety of tools as well at the start there. So they're doing sort of different styles of collaboration again, especially with the POP, for example. Do you use a mixture of things as you're working? Is it just do you kind of stick with your favorites? If you're using WebStorm, you can use Code With Me. If you're using C#, it's Visual Studio Code and LiveShare, for example.
It depends on the project. It depends on the project. It depends what you're doing. So the team I'm currently working on, we actually developing the desktop app, which is where LiveShare falls over. So we use POP for that. But the moment we go into any sort of web development, then I'll be hopping between using LiveShare for the back-end side and using the WebStorm for the front-end side. So I like my IDEs. I like the benefits and the tools which you've got and the features which you've got, and to have all of that available, and then to be able to share that with other people makes it easy. So it's all about what can I do, how can I do better, what's going to give us the best benefit at the end of the day. I want ReSharper available. That's why we're encouraging for it to be added to Rider, because you've got all of those facilities. So I use Visual Studio with ReSharper. And that you can at least share with LiveShare, but you want to get it to be that smooth native environment.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
Also, we don't prescribe for our teams, except we won't allow Discord. It's a memory hungry hog. But we try and tell the teams, well, this is the best guidance we can give. This is what we want you to do, and we try and guide them towards what are good tools. But we try and also treat people like adults. So if you've got a slightly different situation and this is going to work for you, then that's all right.
Absolutely, we kind of agree. Really, it's like we want to provide the best tools, obviously, but if you want to use something else, then that's absolutely fine. We're not going to complain too much. And I should probably mention as well, Rider and Code With Me. The Rider, it is being worked on, basically. Ironically, Code With Me as a protocol, as a sort of actual implementation, is based heavily on how Rider itself works, with like IntelliJ as a UI and something else providing a back end. In Rider's terms, it's ReSharper, but for Code With Me, it's somebody else's machine. It's somebody else's version of WebStorm, PyCharm, Golang, or whatever. So the architecture is very, very similar, but because of that, ironically, it's very hard to sort of get it into Rider, because Rider's already got this split, these two parts already. So it's coming. They're working really hard on it, and they're having to rewrite a big chunk of Rider to work with it. But yes, it's been a long time coming, and we hope to get it maybe next version. We'll see. So yes,
cool.
It's on the
Can you put in the request for the drawing as well on the next version?
I did make a note of that actually. I was like, that's nice.
Yeah.
So I have made a note of that one.
There
I'll
will be
pass
an
that one on
issue
to the team.
upvote.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
where
somebody
I'm
mentioned that you mentioned empathy in the talk, and it's something we don't hear about a lot, but I noticed we're hearing a little bit more about this as an engineering skill. And I think that this is quite a nice area to talk about that. So do you have more comments on empathy in engineering?
I think, one of the things I've said many times is that we think we're in the, we're in the software business, but we're really just in the people business. Because people do everything. So you have nothing until you look after your people. So I don't think it's any different for engineers than anyone else. And I think that everybody's taken a lot of strain the last 2 years. I think it's helped us focus a little bit. In the agile world, there's a lot of talk about, safe spaces, that kind of stuff. It needs to be brought into our workplaces. We've been reducing working hours. We're nowhere near the 4-day week yet, but we're getting slowly less and less hours that we have to put in. We're trying to get that work-life balance and just kind of recognize that you can't do industrial era stuff when you're doing intellectual work. You just burn out and you don't do your best work. So there's so many things to talk about. I think it's probably a bit overloaded for a pairing talk. But yes, I want people to be supported. I want us to support each other. And as tools go, this is a really good way to start getting some of those bonds created.
It's a very, very interesting point now as well about talking about getting overloaded. I mean, I remember when I was working in an office and we were doing pair programming, it could be exhausting. You'd be doing a couple of hours of work of pair programming. You'd be absolutely, way more tired than if you're just spending 2 hours yourself sitting there coding. So do you find that happens with remote pairing as well? It's a similar sort of fairly intense experience. And I guess how do you deal with that, and how do you sort of fit that in with a normal working day if you want to be doing as much pairing as possible?
It's definitely a very intense process. A lot of it depends on the people, right? So if you're using a mentoring session and at some point in the day you might be doing some mentoring, it's not as intense for the mentor because it's leading someone along. It gets intense when it's equals, what about this, and I find that's where magic happens. But we do sort of, through the course of the day, maybe swap pairs, jump into different things, and quite often do a bit of ensemble work, as a group. Okay,
so like sort of mob programming, kind of get everybody in to solve a problem.
Especially planning start of. Yeah. Sorry, Alain.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was going to say, Laura, is the design phase, the planning phase. Even if you've got a debate when you're working along, we encourage people, just tell us where to jump in and join in with the session to discuss something, rather than leaving it till a pull request, rather than leaving it till later in this process. Let's rather deal with it now, get it done, and get it better. And just to add on the empathy side, for some people, we introverted. We tend to be introverted in this industry. And this is a way which encourages people to interact with people. Otherwise, they would be at the stand-up. Maybe if we do check-ins in the afternoon as well, so they see their team a couple of times a day. This is now getting several hours of engagement with others in the team working, which is very good for that part. But you also have to balance it. We often find with pairing, we don't have cameras on because it just helps with the Zoom fatigue, which is another thing we've discovered in the last couple of years. So these all are things which need to be balanced. But the practical thing is, the more you do this, the more your body gets used to it, and the less strained pairing is.
That's very interesting. I heard a great description of introvert and extrovert. And an introvert needs some time by themselves to recharge, while an extrovert needs company to recharge. And I very much agree with that one. It's great to be working together, and you can do a whole lot of things, and encouraging people to work together and interact is great. But then sometimes you just need a bit of time by yourself then to recharge.
So do you happen to hire people on, or when you first started doing a lot of this pairing, did you have a few resistors? Did they come around? how do you find the attitudes when people don't pair and then they kind of come on board and you say, we do pairing here, and that's, or maybe during the interview process, like, how does this work?
It's a lot easier when you're hiring because you can tell them.
Right. But at some point you started doing pairing as a thing. So how was it then when you kind of merged into this? Because I imagine others might have this scenario too.
It's the staff with habits, right? People who, they've got their comfort zones. So they've always worked like this. Why are you messing up my life? You know, I've always worked on my own. And you have to start a little more gently. And we find, you know, planning, because you can say, well, everyone's got to be in planning. Then you can start to talk to, no, but we got to break that silo. And what we found that even the most resistant people, when you say that's fine, if you work alone, you will be on support and standby for that feature alone, suddenly think, oh, I'm willing to show someone. I'm willing to work with somebody. So, you know, I mean, we're doing fairly standard commercial software for clients. So, you know, nobody wants to be on support. Nobody wants to be on standby for calls of odd hours. So we work with our specific problems. And yeah, there's still a few people who clearly do prefer to work alone. But we then just say there's certain things they must do together. And you know, because we can't have silos. We're running a business.
If we're talking about having the sort of more mob programming kind of style there, or at least when you get together, I mean, what kind of scenarios are you working there? You mentioned design, but do you ever kind of like program at the same during this? And what kind of tools and techniques do you use for that kind of role?
I know we do a lot of stuff with, you know, the online whiteboards. Again, that's another whole story about tools, because I still miss a pen. I don't know, there was something about that physical whiteboard that still, I do miss that in the online environment. But we did try and get people to sketch out something, to have put some kind of what we intend to do before you pick up your coding hammer and just start hammering out, you know, code.
Absolutely.
So planning is a big one. But also we just find when we're bringing someone new into a team, they might not be expected to carry that much of a load initially. So we might say join a pair and they become a little mob. There's that. We've got some clients who are amazing for working with us. They'll come into a session and we'll be showing them and they'll tell us, we'll say, hang on, and we can fix it. And, you know, so that's why Alain spoke a little bit about that tag teaming. We're very happy to let things bounce fairly naturally around, depending on the environment and what's needed. What's important about thinking about the more formal things like ping pong TDD or strong mode and these things is that if tag teaming is not working because you have a dominant person in the group, so they're just taking over and sitting on the keyboard and doing everything, then you have to bring something in and say, okay, we're going to use a timer if I have to. We will swap every 5 minutes, but you decide and agree as a team. So you do what you need to do, because, yeah, comfort zones, habits, it take a while to grow out of them. But
if you're using a time, sorry.
It's fine, go.
No, I was just going to say, if you're using a timer to sort of swap between people there, do you also use the tools? I mean, one thing that's interesting with the tools is that you can both be typing at the same time, whereas, you know, traditionally when you're sat side by side at a desk, there's only one keyboard. So do you find that you kind of can both wander off and go and do separate tasks, or is it still quite a bit of my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn?
I think you've got to be careful of wandering off and doing separate tasks, because otherwise you're in a pairing session, but you're actually working individually. So it is that it's a negotiation, it's a discussion. Who you're pairing with affects how it's going to work. You need to have clarified that up front and say, okay, we're going to work. Maybe it's like a cool, if Law and I are pairing on something, which we do from time to time, especially if we want to get something out or come up with something, then we know we're going to tag team. That's how it's going to work, because we've worked together for a lot longer. On the team I'm on at the moment, we've got a new guy who's just joined and getting up to speed with it, and he hasn't used some of the tools before. So in that, it's more of a mentoring mode. But there's 3 people in the pair often. We get him to type a fair bit more than we would otherwise, just so because that thing of actually doing it helps. So I would bring big caution against wandering off and doing your own thing. But when you're debugging, this is just going back to what you said earlier on about breaks. If you're debugging or it's a complex problem space or you need to investigate something, that's a great time to go off solo.
Why? How so?
Well, if you've got a complex problem, you can explore more parts, especially when it's something which needs to be solved under quite timeous pressure. You can go, and then when you find something, you say, guys, I found this. Should we go? And you bring people back together, because it's many sets of eyes now exploring the problem rather than just focused on what the one is. And I personally struggle. Sorry, Rachel?
Oh, sorry, but in divide and conquer.
It is divide and conquer. I find it quite difficult to debug necessarily, because the person who's driving will see the pop-ups a little bit faster for what the variables are and things like that. So I struggle with debugging in a pairing mode. That's my personal experience, and that's why you've got to work out. So I will often say, let's debug independently, and then when you find something, you bring it back together and look at it.
My one is that there's times for talking and bouncing ideas, and you get better ideas, and there's times for thinking on your own. You know, we're very complex beings. You know, so sometimes I have to go for a walk with my dog to solve a problem because I need thinking time.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can't
sleep on it.
in the station.
You can only shower so many times in a day to think about stuff or drive around the block.
You know, we need to acknowledge whatever we need in that session. The only criteria that I try and talk to people about is as long as you're engaged. If you find yourself just like disengaging, then it's time to split. It's time to say, hang on, I'm disengaging. Let me either take a break, or I need to go think about this, or, you know, so follow that as a rule.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for an absolutely fascinating session there. I've really enjoyed that. And yes, we'll try and get Code With Me into Rider and the pen as well. So that sounds good.